Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be guiding you to a night of restful sleep as I tell you the story of two vampires finding love, family, and belonging in their mountain castle home. Before we begin, let us take a moment to relax and find comfort in the space that we are in. Gently close your eyes and allow yourself to melt into the mattress underneath you. With your eyes closed, imagine a table next to a crackling fireplace. What color is the table? What material is it made of? Is it smooth, or does it have intricate carvings on the sides? Once you have your table in mind, imagine puzzle pieces scattered across the table. As you breathe in, imagine those puzzle pieces slowly coming together, snapping into place for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you exhale, look deeply at the pieces that have come together. What is the image of your puzzle? How many colors, shapes, and patterns are in the picture you've put together so far? As you inhale yet again, see more and more pieces of the puzzle gently snapping into place. Feel the relief as they blend together perfectly, making a photo that feels more whole with every breath. Exhale, imagining your fingers tracing over the smooth top of the puzzle, feeling the tiny valleys where the pieces become one. Inhale, watching more pieces come together for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you exhale, imagine yourself melting into the peaceful scene on your puzzle. Feel your body completely relax. Now that we have taken the time to relax, let us begin. Tessabelle could hear the birds jovially flitting through the forest before her eyes even opened. This morning, their song was different. For several weeks, their chirps had been dulled by the weight of the fluffy snow coating the forest floor and the alpine cliffs. But now, there was a vividness in their chirps. It was as though they were singing their songs from the top of her wardrobe or the headboard directly above her pillow. But it wasn't just the birds that she could hear. It was all the creatures of the forest. It was frogs lazily floating in the ponds, deer snuggled in the meadow grass, and crickets perched on the edge of chrysanthemums. It was the forest shrugging off the final frost of winter, embracing the warm kiss of the spring sun. Tessabelle opened her eyes from her comfortable bed and was greeted with a sight unlike any other out her window. It was as though she was staring at a watercolor painting. The landscape was awash in greens, blues, purples, and the bright, bright yellows of daffodils and daisies. She lay there for quite some time, breathing in sync with the movement of the forest just beyond the window. But soon, she wasn't the only one lying in bed. Ichabod slid under the covers beside her, a cup of steaming green tea in hand. Like every morning, he pecked her cheek and handed her the handmade mug with a smile. "Today is the day," he muttered against the nape of her neck. Tessabel felt a wave of comfort and joy wash over her. Today was the day she would be opening her own library and cafe in Briar Cliff, the town in the valley just below. Tessabel rose from the bed, wrapping a warm wool robe against her skin. She sipped her tea, put her clothes on for the day, and prepared herself for an experience that she knew would bring calm and joy into her life. Ichabod walked her down the winding road on the mountain. All around them, swaths of fog laced through the cedar forest, carrying the smell of newly bloomed wildflowers along in its mist. At the base of the mountain, in a peaceful part of the valley, her new building came into view. The tiny stone building, no larger than a room, resembled a witch's cabin. A chimney rose from the green roof, which had long been covered in vibrant moss. A river wound around the back of the building, while two ancient oak trees rose on either side, shading the building with their mighty branches. The sound of leaves rustling in the spring breeze and the river racing with the water of melting alpine fields put Ichabod and Tessabel entirely at ease. Inside, the building was lined with large bookshelves full of every book imaginable. In the corner of the room was an open fire pit, and the stone stove with logs neatly stacked next to it. Tessabel knelt by the fire pit, lighting a set of logs with ease. Within minutes, the crackling fire took the chill out of the room, leaving them with a cozy, warm space to spend their day. Near the fire, Tessabel mixed batter and dough for fresh cakes, cookies, and rosemary breads. Soon, the library was sweet with aroma of sugar, cranberries, and freshly picked herbs. It wasn't long before the children of the town came in, their eyes alive with wonder and delight. For months, they had been told tales of the vampires that lived up in the castle, and now they could buy sweets and books from them. They giggled as they bought their cookies and small books with spare coins. As they grew more and more comfortable, some of the children settled on the floor by the fire, munching on their treats. Ichabod settled down next to them, plucking a single book off the shelf. As he began to read the story in his charming, animated voice, the children paused their snacking, transfixed by his magical storytelling. Tessabel sat in an armchair, watching the children giggle and crowd around her husband. A few climbed onto his lap, resting their heads against his chest as he continued to read. The sight gave Tessabel a feeling unlike any other. Her love and affection for her husband grew by the second, and with it, a long-hidden desire was awakened. When she was a human, she had dreamt of having a cabin in the woods with a husband and children. She daydreamed about the lessons she would teach them and the long hours they would spend reading stories by the fireplace. But since she had become a vampire, that dream fell to the wayside. Vampires couldn't have children of their own, and raising a human child would be far too heartbreaking. As she gazed at her husband playing with the village children, she felt as though something clicked into place deep within her. She thought back to the glimpse of the future Ichabod showed her on Valentine's Day. She had seen them with 2 children, but how could that be possible? Little did she know, Ichabod was feeling the same way. The local children tugged at his pant legs and giggled with pure joy. He smiled up at Tessabel, just as she helped a small child unwrap a sweet. She glowed in the presence of these children in a way he'd never seen before. He thought of all the decades he had thought of having children, but quickly realized that he'd never wanted them more than at this precise moment. At the end of the day, the building fell still and quiet. Tessabel and Ichabod quietly worked around each other, their minds drifting to another life, where they had children running around their castle, causing mischief and filling their home with love. On the walk home, the two made their way up the mountain, mostly in silence. The sun set over the other side of the valley, casting an orange and pink glow across the breathtaking landscape. It seemed to catch on the mist and dangle there, hovering midair like a chandelier made of the setting sun. The birds were even louder now, as they all made their way home to their nests for the night. The deer lazily meandered through the sagebrush, deeper and deeper into the cedar forest, on their way to their new fawns. Finally, Tessabel and Ichabod arrived home. They made their way to bed and lay in the soft comforter, holding each other for quite some time. The topic that had been on both their minds all day was brought to light when Ichabod mumbled, "I want a child with you, Tessabel. I want us to be parents." Tessabel held Ichabod even tighter. She asked how they could raise children, and the answer that Ichabod gave was a welcomed surprise. Ichabod told her that there were vampire children out there in the world. There were very few, but sometimes they would pop up, needing a home. If they could find them, they could adopt them and bring them home. As soon as those words tumbled from his lips, they both knew that that would be their mission moving forward. That night, they both dreamt of what their life would soon be. They dreamt of a home full of children's laughter. They imagined winters spent sledding down the nearby hills and drinking hot chocolate by the fire. They imagined summers spent in the mist of the nearby waterfalls, teaching their children to swim. And when morning crested over the mountains surrounding their castle, they were both ready for their journey. Ichabod mapped several places around the world where they could ask local vampire clans for help. Their journey would take them to the Pacific Northwest, San Antonio de Eureka in Africa, the Faroe Islands, and China. As a child, Tessabel had never imagined she'd see so much of the world, but now it felt almost like her destiny. Ichabod and Tessabel got on the next boat that would take them to the Faroe Islands, the clan closest to them. When the islands came into view, the sweet rush of hope flooded both their bodies. As usual, The steep, mountainous islands were cloaked in a thick layer of fog. The fog seemed to happily rest on the verdant hills that went on for miles, peppered by cattle and the rocks that had been strewn across the hillside millions of years. The boat bobbed over icy waves to reach the docks, which sat in a cozy, rocky cove at the base of a small village. The village reminded Tessabel very much of their own, only this village had buildings that were all colors of the rainbow. They seemed to pop against the gray haze the ocean cast on the island. Tessabel took in each and every building. Their child could be in one of the buildings just beyond the docks. They meandered through the cobblestone streets, breathing in the briny aroma of the ocean and the sweet smells of every bakery they passed. Their journey led them to a building on the far side of the island, on the edge of the cliff, overlooking more islands in the distance. The head of the clan, Cordelia, met Tessabel and Ichabod with a smile. She invited them into the great room to get out of the fog and rain. Unfortunately, she didn't have great news. Over a cup of steaming tea, she told Ichabod and Tessabel, "Our clan takes in members from Scandinavia, the UK, and most of Europe. We had children many, many years ago, but they were taken in by my beloved Alex and me. At first, they were both disappointed, but it soon filled Tessabel with hope. How was it raising a child?" she asked. Cordelia smiled as she wistfully gazed into the distance. "It was, and is, the most magical thing that's ever happened to us. Our son came to us when he was about 4. When children become vampires, they don't remain the age they are turned at. They physically mature until sometime in their 20s, and then they stay that age physically forever." The news almost brought tears to Tessabel's eyes. She had no idea that any child they took on would progress through childhood normally. They would get to see their child grow and change and evolve over time. It would be the greatest gift. They thanked Cordelia for her kindness and took the spare room for a quick rest before they continued their journey. That night, however, Tessabel lay awake for quite some time. Just outside the thin window pane, she could hear the melody of the waves crashing against the rocky cliff sides, hundreds of feet down below. She got out of bed and tiptoed outside. The view before her took her breath away. The sky, which had been cloudy all day, was now alive with millions and millions of stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky as if a celestial god had taken the finest brush she could find and had painted a single stroke of the heavens across the inky black night. The haze of the galaxy and stars transfixed Tessabel, who plopped down in the dewy grass and gazed up in wonder. Beneath her, she could almost feel the repetitive crash of the waves. They went to sea, then came to the cliffs, went to sea, then came to the cliffs, went to sea, then came to the cliffs. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking in the melody of nature at its finest. When she opened her eyes, a familiar face was smiling down at her. mind if I join you, darling?" Ichabod whispered, settling down beside his wife. He interlocked his fingers with hers, exhaling a sigh of utter peace. They lay there in silence for quite some time, drumming their fingers against the palm of each other's hands. They each ran their other hand over the cool, dewy grass, feeling the droplets roll off the edge of their thumb and into the soil down below. "Do you think we'll do this with our child?" Tessabel asked. Ichabod chuckled to himself, wrapping his arm around his wife and pulling her even closer against him. "Of course our child will do this with us," he chimed. "We'll lie under the stars every night and talk about the old legends and gods and goddesses. Perhaps our child will even grow up to be an astronomer." Tessabel imagined standing in the observatory on the top floor of their castle, bouncing their child in her lap, letting them look into the telescope to the beautiful sky above. "Or perhaps our child will be a writer someday, writing legends of their own," Tessabel mused. "I don't care what our child is or becomes, as long as they are happy, deeply, truly, unashamedly happy," Ichabod whispered. Tessabel gazed at her husband, backlit by that magical night sky. The words slid out of her mouth like honey as she said, "With a father like you, they'll be happy every day of their life." Ichabod turned to Tessabel with a smile on his face as he replied, "And with a mother like you." The two slept soundly that night, dreaming of the family they would soon come to have. By the time the sun rose, they were already on the next boat, which was heading down the Atlantic to the great continent of Africa. Their journey led them into the Cape of Guinea to the island of Bioko. As the island slipped into view, it looked like something out of a legend. Rising out of the fog, the mountainous island was a swath of brilliant green against the dark sea. Tessabel hung over the railing of the ship, breathing in the sweet smell of the rainforest-cloaked island. As the boat grew closer, Tessabel could just make out the tropical birds as they made their way from branch to branch. Slowly, the boat turned, heading up a long, winding river. On either side, the tendrils of plants and trees dipped in the water, moving with the ebb and flow of the river. It was as though they were sinking into a painting. Ichabod felt as though he could reach out and touch the birds flying by, or the vibrant flowers dangling from the branches on each side. Soon, the village came into view. In that instant, Tessabel felt something click within her. She felt as though somehow she was home. Something she had longed for had to be on these shores, just moments away. Ichabod led Tessabel up the banks of the river and into the forest. In the distance, toward the peak of a small mountain, she could see the shape of a building overlooking the forest below. The building was covered in vines and flowers, which had been long fused to the stone. The fragrant smell of flowers and fresh cooked food wafted through the thick forest from the building, inviting Tessabel and Ichabod closer and closer. Deo met them with a smile. In fact, every part of her seemed to be filled with joy. Her amber eyes sparkled as she threw her arms around Tessabel and Ichabod, welcoming them to her clan. She and Ichabod had known each other for hundreds of years. The feeling Tessabel had been overcome with when they arrived on the island grew even stronger now. In a soft voice, she took Deo by the arm and asked her, "Are there any orphaned children here?" Deo smiled as she said, "So that's what brought you two here. Why don't you follow me?" They slowly made their way through the stone hallways of the building. Even inside, the walls were coated in dozens of plants and flowers, bringing a sense of calm with every step they took. Finally, they reached a set of tall, wooden doors etched with designs that were decades old. Deo opened the doors gently, revealing a botanical room alive with butterflies, flowers, and bubbling creeks. And in the center of the room, there were two cots. Everything moved in slow motion for Tessabel as she slowly inched her way toward them, taking Ichabod's hand in hers. When she finally laid eyes on them, she felt a rush of love unlike any other. Two children gazed up at her with wide eyes, no more than 2 years old. On the right, a baby girl began to smile, dark brown curls bouncing against her face as she tried to pull herself closer to Tessabel and Ichabod. On the left, a little baby boy gazed at them deeply, his hand reaching out for them as he cooed and muttered. Just like that, Tessabel and Ichabod were in love. Just like that, their family felt whole. They were abandoned here just a week ago. Oddly, they haven't taken to anyone yet. I had never seen them smile until you walked in, Deo mumbled. It seems like fate. And indeed, it did feel like fate. Tessabel took the young girl in her arms, and the baby placed her head on her chest, looking up at her new mother with delight. Ichabod picked up his new son, rocking him gently. It felt like something that was always meant to be. The little girl is named Afia, and the little boy is Amari, Deo said, and now it looks like they're yours. That night, Tessabel and Ichabod brought Afia and Amari's cots into the guest room. They lay in bed for quite some time, simply watching their children sleep. With every rise and fall of their tiny chests, Tessabel felt joy unlike any other. Several times, happy tears swelled in her eyes. Ichabod wiped them away with a smile, for he understood exactly how she was feeling. They lay like that until sunrise, watching Afia and Amari's every moment, every breath. It was as if the center of their world had shifted entirely and was now over the two darling angels lying peacefully beside them. The next morning, they walked back to the boat with their new children in their arms. Their personalities had already begun to show. Afia was a child in awe of the world, her gaze locked on every passing bird, person, and plant. Amari, on the other hand, had his gaze locked entirely on his new parents. As the boat began to leave the harbor, Deo waved goodbye from the shoreline. She had told Tessabel how happy she was to see Ichabod become a family man. She could remember conversations she had with him 100, 200, even 300 years ago, where he would muse about his dreams for a wife and family one day, when the time was right. And now, the time was right. Slowly, the island disappeared into the distance, and the reality of the journey ahead of them began to settle in. They sat in bed, holding their children close as the boat rocked back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Soon they would be home. Soon they would show their children the woods and the forests where they could explore and soak in the beauty of the world around them. Soon they would grow, love, and laugh together. But for now, they were going to soak in every moment of this new life. They were going to soak in the view of one another holding a child, holding their child, and be grateful for the gift the universe had given them. I hope you have enjoyed this sleep story, and it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.